Hey guys, welcome back to another video, and today we're going to talk about 10 things I hate about airbrushing. And it's not to make you shy away from the airbrush, it's so you are kind of aware what to expect if you are starting to airbrush. If you are already airbrushing and already established, if I miss any of these or you have more tips or things that you hate about airbrushing, go ahead and leave them in the comments below. This way we can all learn from each other and get better at it. So let's go ahead and start with the 10 things I hate about airbrushing. So all these 10 are not in a particular order, they're just random, so you can take it as you wish. And the first one is the initial cost of having the setup. So you have initial buy-in for the compressor, the airbrush itself, and all the paints that obviously you want different variety of colors, and all of that is fairly expensive at the beginning. So your airbrush, you're probably looking at somewhere on an average of $150. The compressor, depending on how loud it's going to be or the capacity of the compressor, you're probably looking at somewhere between $250 to maybe $500-$600 for the compressor. And let's see, the paints, you can get away with starting with obviously black and white just to get started and to practice. But eventually you want to get different variety of paints, not only a different color series, but also different types of paints. So most of the majority of the paints that I have are acrylic, and they run from $4, $5 to $10 an average size bottle. Anything bigger than that, you're probably looking at $15-$16 for the big bottles. For example, like black and white, you definitely need a lot of, and in the other bottles, which I have here in the back, they're averaging around maybe like $4 or $6 depending on the size. Also, you want to not only have paints that are opaque, which are good to overlay on top of each other so they can cover another color, or you also want to have like transparent paints, so you can stack the colors on top of each other, and you can get a variety of variations in your color. So having like all those colors does definitely add up. And of course, if you're doing specialty stuff like painting plastics and stuff like that, you do have additional kind of like primers, if you will, for those plastics. So the initial cost, like I said, depending on what system you want to go with, will definitely put you back a little bit. So that's one of the things I really hate about the airbrushing is that cost. So for me, I've been doing it so long and had a variety of airbrushes, the same one, not different, but the same one, and I buy like an airbrush maybe every 3 years, 4 years maybe, and then throughout the year I'm buying like smaller parts for the airbrush, like the tip, that gets used up a lot, and that runs you parts, usually you'll pay like $20 here, $25 there, and so forth. So cost is the number one thing I hate about airbrushing, but that's not the only one. Included in that number one thing I hate about airbrushing is also the location of where you're gonna airbrush. Luckily for me, I have a little section here in my house where it was an outdoor patio, and it's kind of covered up, so I can contain all the overspray in here. But even if I try really hard to keep all the overspray in this area, obviously it will overflow to like I have a kitchen that's like right next to it. So if I open the sliding door to go in there and get a glass of water, then some of that little overspray will eventually make itself to the floor in the kitchen. So that's one thing that I also hate, is the overspray. In addition to location, some of you may, well, you do have to have a section for you to airbrush. So you have to designate an area where you're going to be spraying all the time. If it's going to be outside, you have to kind of think about the fact that sometimes it's going to get really cold outside and it's going to get really hot outside as well. So those two, and here we're here in California for myself, and you know, when it's cold, it's really cold in here because there is no insulation. I'm literally outside, so my fingers kind of get cold and stiff. When it's really hot, I'm literally melting. You know, it's a real sweatshop in here, and I'm drenched in sweat, and I'm still pumping out shirts and stuff like that. So, you know, that's the other thing that I hate is not having a specific location or where it's kind of like insulated and has AC, and you can still do the overspray and stuff like that. So that's the other thing included in that first section of things I hate. So cost, location, what else? Yeah, and just like the overall, you know, overspray and stuff like that. So that's all included in the number one spot. So, and coming to number two, the 10 things that I hate about airbrushing is the fact that it's really messy. So I've talked to a lot of artists, and that's the main issue with airbrushing is that that it's really messy. You know, obviously you have the overspray, which is the general thing. You'll take a look at around my shop, my little area here, and my other equipment is covered in overspray, and that eventually, you know, damages the other equipment. So that's the issue with overspray. It gets everywhere. You're constantly having to clean, and if you don't, you know, you'll start seeing the dust or the overspray settle in the other equipment. Along with that, it being messy, when you're loading up your airbrush with the bottles, sometimes like the paint doesn't come out the way you want it, and you over squeeze the bottle, so it'll overshoot, and you'll miss the little cup of the airbrush, and it'll get all over the place. So you know, even though I've been doing this for forever, that's one of the main issues and frustrations is the fact that I squeeze the bottle, and you know, more paint than I wanted to comes out and gets all over the place, and now you have to stop what you're doing to clean up that mess. So it gets all over your hands. It's just frustrating. So another thing about airbrushing is that depending on the compressor that you have, you may have oil coming through that compressor, and that gets everywhere if it's, you know, if the compressor is not taken care of, which I had, you know, with this other compressor I'll show you here in a second. You know, that one had oil, came through the line, comes through the line, gets all messy. You have to take apart everything to clean all the oil off of it before you can continue doing your work. So especially if you're doing something like plastic, where you don't put any oil whatsoever on that material or your piece whatsoever, because then when you go to apply another color or apply the clear, you know, obviously it's gonna, you know, not stick, so you'll have a big issue with that. So what else? And of course, the final thing about number two is the cleanup. So after you use the airbrush, you have to clean the airbrush every single time, otherwise it gets clogged. You gotta paint all your clean all your little bottles. So that's kind of annoying in a way. But other than that, I mean, that's pretty much it. Just, you know, it's kind of messy. You gotta continuously be cleaning. And then you know, some people use like one bottle per color, and they have several different airbrushes for that particular color, which makes it quicker and easier to do airbrush production if you're doing a lot of shirts. So the reason why I don't have that set up is because well, first of all, I don't need a lot of airbrushes, and I'm not doing events and stuff like that. So you know, I have the ability to wash my little cup, and that gives me also the ability to mix colors, custom colors, fairly quickly. And continuing with number two, the final step in finishing your work while airbrushing is obviously clean up. You have to clean the airbrush completely, and all your little paint cups. They have to be cleaned for the next time. Otherwise, obviously, it's gonna get clogged, and you don't want that whatsoever. So that's the other thing that's kind of annoying. You are able to you've probably seen other airbrush artists that have one airbrush per color, and they're able to do shirts quicker and faster. The reason why I don't do that, that's actually a good way to kind of prevent you having to do a lot of cleanup, because all you gotta do is you just cap that bottle and run water through your different airbrushes, and you're done. The reason why I don't do that is because I don't do that much production event stuff, or I'm not constantly doing like a lot of shirts like all day. So I'll do like one shirt here, or maybe like two shirts here and stuff like that. So for me to have like a lot of airbrushes and a big setup, it's not it's too much for me, like and then I also like custom mixing my colors. I'm trying to actually reduce the amount of colors that I have, and I'm trying to only get the main primary colors and custom mix my colors as I go along through my through my project. So I'll be trying to do that this year, where I'm trying to get rid of the majority of the colors that I have. I'm trying to work through them. Mainly the basic colors, like stuff like neon, fluorescent stuff. Like you can't really mix that stuff, so I'll keep all that stuff, and obviously my primary color. So other than that, that's pretty much it for number 2, and that's for the 10 things I hate about airbrushing. So the number 3 thing that I hate about airbrushing is the fact that the airbrush gets clogged constantly, and it's kind of frustrating when you don't know where the clog is. So it could happen within the cup, it could happen in the airbrush when it's sucking up the paint, or it could happen on the tip of the airbrush itself. And there's a lot of parts happening, and if your tip is too small, or you're shooting a lot constantly, or your pressure is too high, some of that paint gets dried on the tip. You have to take the thing apart, clean it, and reshoot. Sometimes you can get away with back pressuring the airbrush, which what you do is you kind of take the paint bottle off. Put your finger on the front, and you kind of spray the air, and that forces the air to back pressure into where the paint usually gets sucked into, and that blows away any like paint boogers that you have in there, or clog dry paint that's probably in your paint and somehow, or in your bottle, and eventually made itself onto the cup and got stuck in there. So you can blow it out, and that's always a pain in the butt, because obviously you have to stop and fix the issue. You have to first problem solve it, where where the clog is. Once you find it, you have to clean the stuff up, run water through it. If it's not unclogging with the water, then you have to use something a little bit stronger. I use Totally Awesome from like the Dollar Tree. So again, you have to kind of troubleshoot and figure out where the clog is. So it's just annoying. So that's the number 3 or third thing that I hate about airbrushing. So for the number 4 thing that I hate about airbrushing would be the compressor. So obviously you can't do airbrush without a compressor. You can use other options as far as compressed air, but the majority of the people, we use a compressor, and the compressor tends to be a little bit loud. There's always oil in the compressor, depending on which compressor you have. It may require oil. Sometimes you'll get oil through the line, and that ends up working its way into your work. The other thing about the compressor, obviously, like I mentioned on number 1, it's a little pricey, and obviously takes some area in your shop. And of course, because you're using compressed air, the air in there kind of turns into moisture, so you'll get some of that moisture coming out as well. So obviously you have to have a filter in front of the compressor. This way it filters all that stuff out, the oil and the moisture. But sometimes, there is times when that actually works its way through the line, and it's kind of annoying when you're working on hard surfaces, because if you get like a little bit of moisture, it's gonna splatter. It's gonna do some sort of like a spider web onto your particular, I guess, point of paint that you're like pushing out. If you get moisture in there, it's gonna you know land on that little spot where you're airbrushing, and then it's gonna splatter and do this, and it's gonna push all that paint out, and it's gonna ruin your work. You're gonna have to clean that up, and go over it or clean that area up, and that's really annoying, especially if you're doing small details. That's when it really comes in and it happens. And when you're working on large areas, you don't really have to worry about it because you can just kind of spray over it. But when you're working like on an eye or something very small and very detailed, and that happens, it's really annoying. So other than that, like maintenance on the compressor. Every time you are done airbrushing, you have to clear out all the air inside the compressor, and you have to open the tank to make sure there's no moisture in there, and you have to release all that moisture. So that's number 4 of all the things that I hate about the airbrush. Oh, one last thing in regards to number 4. Sometimes when the airbrush gets clogged, you get some of the air pushing back into your paint cup, and as you're airbrushing, you'll notice that there's bubbles forming inside your paint cup. So that's really annoying, because eventually it's gonna it's gonna back pressure through the little cup, and if it's really clogged in the front, when you go and press that trigger, all that paint's gonna blow out from your cup, and that's a lot of mess. So that's included in number 4. And coming in at number 5 is the fact that sometimes when you're airbrushing, the needle itself, when you pull the trigger back, it gets stuck open towards the back, and when you come back and try to start airbrushing, that needle is pushed back. So when you go down to push on the air, you get a whole bunch of paint coming out, because that needle is stuck open and all the paint is being sucked up, and you don't even know. Maybe you're in a small area and you push down and just paint all over your work. So that's really annoying. You always have to keep making sure that needle is forward before you even start, and it's always annoying when it actually happens. The other thing too is that sometimes the trigger itself, when you push it down and you're working, you let it go, and air's still coming out when you're not touching the trigger, and that's because the trigger gets stuck when it's getting pushed down, and that happens when the airbrush itself or the parts are kind of old. You can resolve that by putting a little bit of oil or grease on there, and it'll help you out. But it's really annoying when it happens and you're in the middle of work, and you get pain where you're not supposed to, and it's really, really annoying. One more thing to add to number 5 is that the front of the needle always gets dry, and you're always constantly, you've probably seen when I'm airbrushing that I'm always constantly airbrushing and then doing this, and it's not a tick, but what it is I'm actually trying to clean the tip with my nails every single time. There is a little crown that comes on the airbrush, the one that I use, and that is to protect not only you from getting stabbed with the needle, but it also protects the tip of the needle, just in case you drop the airbrush, the needle doesn't bend. But the little crown is annoying, because if you're constantly using the airbrush, that needle, or the paint that's coming through over the needle, it dries on the tip. So because it dries on the tip, you have to constantly be cleaning that tip. Otherwise, when you go to paint, instead of getting a real fine line, you get like this weird thick faded line that's crooked going somewhere, because there's a buildup on that tip, and the paint coming through is gonna blow over and create this like weird shape. So that's why the needle is very pointy, so you get real fine lines, because the paint goes over and it, because it's kind of thin, it goes, you know, goes towards the front of the needle and shoots very clean and very sharp. So yeah, it's annoying having to clean that tip all the time. And coming in at number 6 of the 10 things I hate about airbrushing is the learning curve at the beginning. So if you already are good at drawing or good at painting and stuff like that, you kind of already know how to shade, how to, you know, how to paint and how to make something look a certain way. Where in the air, using the airbrush, you have a little bit of a learning curve. Even though you're pretty good at already drawing, you have to learn how to manage the airbrush. And for someone that already knows how to draw, it's very frustrating to have that learning curve, because you're trying to get something that you already know how to do, and it's not coming out, and it's really frustrating. And knowing that you already know how to do it, but it's for some reason not coming out because your technical uh, you know, your skill is not there yet with the airbrush. So you know, it's really frustrating knowing that you know how to do something, but it's not coming out because you don't have the technical know-how or the practice to be able to get that you know, get that line, or get that shading just the way you wanted it to look. So learning curve, you know, obviously it's going to take time and practice. You're probably looking at if you practice constantly, you'll probably get it within like maybe within a month. You'll get pretty good at it. But to get like, for example, lettering, like I still have issues trying to get good lettering onto my work freehand. So that's, you know, something that I have to work with, you know, try to get to, and that's a lot of practice. So so yeah, like, you know, just a learning curve in itself takes a while depending on how much practice you put in. Obviously, if you're gonna do it every single day, you'll get better at it quicker. So just don't get frustrated at the beginning. I know it is going to be a little frustrating, but try to push through and practice, and eventually you'll get it. The one thing I would probably say is to get thin lines, try to go in super close. To get fatter lines, just go from far and just practice it that way, you know, going in and out. So yeah, let's go ahead and go to the next one. Coming in at number 7 of the 10 things I hate about airbrushing is that, like I mentioned before, there is that tip of that needle, and it is a needle, and I usually work with the crown that covers that needle removed. This way it's easier and quicker for me to clean out that tip as I keep working. And because it's exposed, you always, not always, but eventually you'll find out, you'll stab yourself with the needle. And I'm not talking about just lightly, like you'll really stab yourself, and it really, really hurts, especially in the on the fingertip where it's really sensitive and you stab yourself. Man, it's annoying, it hurts, and it's frustrating. So you know, that's one of the things that you have to look out for when you're airbrushing. It sucks, but it's eventually gonna happen. Not only that, but you know, because like right now my airbrush is just sitting there because, you know, maybe I'll pick it up and I'll do a job. You know, I don't put it away. And then so when I'm working around the airbrush or reaching over trying to get something, maybe my shirt gets caught on the needle and I step away and pull the airbrush along with me, you know, or I'm doing something and the airbrush is sitting there, stab myself with it because I, you know, overlooked it, and you know. So obviously you can avoid that, but if you are constantly working airbrushing, and your airbrush is always going to be out. So that's the one thing I hate about, man, it's it really hurts when you stab yourself with the airbrush. Also, when you're cleaning the airbrush, you have it apart, you have the needle, and you're trying to clean the airbrush, and somehow you know, you get distracted and you stab yourself with the needle. So that's really frustrating. But hey, what are you gonna do? That's the way the airbrush itself is designed. So yeah, just be ready for that. So stabbing yourself is part of number 7. So I just want to clear that up. So number 6 was the learning curve. Number 7 is like stabbing yourself with a needle. So I just want to make sure that we're on the right number. And the next one is number 8, which is working on black shirts. The reason why I hate working on black shirts is because it takes a lot of paint to cover the black shirt. Not only that, but the fabric itself, when you're working on a shirt, it absorbs all that paint. So you have to let it dry, come back and do another coat, and another coat, and another coat, and another coat. And you have to constantly be applying white paint. And this is where, like, if you don't have the right brand of paint, and there is no perfect paint for black shirts. It's just like what you prefer to shoot. And there's some thinner paints that shoot really nice. They feel very silky when you're airbrushing, but then it takes a lot of layers to do the black shirt. Or you'll have other paints that are really thick and will cover the black shirt, but then your airbrush gets clogged all the time because you're shooting thicker paint with a higher pressure to try to get that thick paint through the airbrush, and obviously it dries quicker on the tip, so you're constantly cleaning, and so it depends, so it's really annoying working on black shirts. And of course you're using more material and taking more time to dry each layer and stuff like that, but the end results, like, they always come out really nice. I really like the way the black shirts look airbrush if it's done properly. I've seen a lot of shirts that get airbrush with like 1 or 2 layers of white, and you wash it and you take a look at it, and it's not, the color is just gone. Like, it looks very faded, very dull, like it just looks dark, so I like to put a lot of white layers onto my shirt, even if I'm doing color, especially when I'm doing color. Yeah, it just takes more pain, more time, and that's one of the things I really hate as well is the working on black shirts. So what are you gonna do? They look really cool though. I really like those. Of course, working with the black shirts, you'll end up doing your work multiple times because you're doing a lot of strokes. Whereas if you obviously were working on a white shirt, you do one stroke and you're done. With the black shirt, you're always constantly putting down the same stroke over and over and over and over and over again. But what we're gonna do. And coming in at number 9 of the 10 things I hate about airbrushing is the fact that sometimes your paint will get old, or it'll get moldy sometimes. I don't even know how that's even possible, but I have one bottle that's moldy, and that's a big issue, especially if you're shooting that through the air and you don't have a mask on. Guess what? That's going to be a big issue. So I'm not really sure how that happens. I don't know if there's a manufacturer defect. I've never had it on other paints of the same brand or the same color. I think it's just that one batch. Maybe they put something in there to prevent mold from building, and maybe that last bottle didn't get enough or whatever. The other thing is that when the paint gets old, there's it starts like getting thicker, and it starts like creating bubbles, like, or not bubbles, but like paint boogers. They're kind of dry, they're in there, and you can't really tell, right? And when you put it in your airbrush and you shoot it, it'll shoot through that airbrush, or it'll clog your airbrush. So if they're small enough, they'll shoot through and they'll make their way onto the item that you're spraying, which is no big deal. But when it gets clogged, that's where the big issue is, because now you got to take everything apart. It's in there. You got to figure out a way to get it out of there, whether it be clean the airbrush or trying to do that quick tip of trying to blow back the paint through the feeder. So that's really annoying. There is a way to fix that. I have like little filters that normally are used for painting cars. They use that filter to strain their paint before they actually shoot it. This way there's no imperfection in the paint. And I use the more coarse filter So when I see that some of my paint bottles are kind of old, or I'm getting a little bit of an issue constantly of one particular paint, what I'll do is I'll dump all the paint into a cup or into that filter, and allow it to filter, and then I'll use a brand new bottle, and dump all that paint into the new bottle. This way, I'm guaranteed that there's no residue whatsoever in that old bottle, and I'll just throw that away and just keep the new bottle. And that's been working pretty good. That happened recently with one of my colors, the yellow, and I'll show you there in a second. But yeah, there's what else is there? And this has nothing to do with the airbrush, but on the side note, like when I do custom controllers or hard plastic surfaces, the sometimes the spray, like if I clear coat or something, for some reason it doesn't. It'll like it'll dry too fast and it'll wrinkle up, or or it's too cold, and or there's a lot of moisture in the air and it just doesn't sit right, or sometimes you get debris in the clear coat and it's a pain in the butt to get it out and try to clear coat as soon as possible to try to fix that area. Or if it's really in there, you have to wait until it's dry, sand the whole thing, and touch up that little area. So that's on a side note. It doesn't have to do with the actually airbrushing, but it's kind of annoying as well. So obviously having a nice area to spray where you don't have debris flying around and stuff like that is kind of beneficial. But if you don't have an area, it could be frustrating. So that's something to keep in mind. And the last thing I hate about airbrushing, which would be number 10, and I've already kind of mentioned that in one of the previous numbers, is the fact that you get like kind of spider sprays, like with too much pressure, or when you have moisture in the line and you're shooting, you get paint on there and then moisture comes out, and then too much pressure, and it does one of these, like it starts splattering like that, especially on small details. So that's the thing I hate about airbrushing, number 10. And also when you have a compressor that requires oil, and that oil gets fed through the line again, and you have the same issue like the moisture, oil gets on there, it splatters, or it spiders out from the pressure, and then more, you're trying to airbrush, so more of the paint gets on top of the oil. Now it's not going to stick because it's on the oil. So that's a big issue, especially when you're doing hard surfaces like plastics and metals and stuff like that. With the shirt, you're kind of okay, because the moisture kind of goes through the shirt and hits the back of the board, and obviously dries really fast, so there's no issue. If there's a little bit of oil, I mean, it's not gonna damage your piece or anything like that. So you're okay when it comes to doing shirts. But when you're doing hard surfaces, that's where the big issue is, because now you gotta dab, you gotta clean, figure out a way to get that oil off of there to be able to apply more paint. And obviously you don't want to have any oil whatsoever if you're gonna clear coat. And the way around it, if you guys don't know, they have special like inter coats, or like coats, or inner coats that go after your paint but before the clear coat, and this kind of seals like any type of debris, any oil that's on there. It kind of seals everything in. This way when you're going to should clear, it'll come out really nice, and everything's just gonna be sealed right up. So that's a quick solution for that, but it's annoying when it actually happens. So so that's gonna be the 10 things I hate about airbrushing, and it's something to look at when you're getting ready to airbrush, or you're looking into getting to airbrush. And it's gonna happen. It's constantly happening all the time. Just be aware that it's gonna happen. Don't get frustrated. Just keep going. Keep practicing and stuff like that. So hopefully that'll help you guys out. If you guys are looking to get started with airbrushing, and this way you know what to look for when you get all these problems. So I'm gonna do another video later on in the future, trying to problem solve some of the issues that people have when airbrushing, and I'm also gonna try to do another video on just pure equipment and stuff like that. So hopefully it'll help you guys, especially all the people out there that are wanting to learn how to airbrush or want to get into it. This way it motivates you guys to you know, get a system and go out there and start painting and stuff like that. I enjoy it. It's fun. It looks really cool. So you know, I've been doing it many years. So another thing I want to show you guys is some artwork of mine. When, you know, I started out, I found an old album with old art, you know, pictures and stuff like that. So I want to show you guys that. This way you can kind of see the beginnings of my work. It's always fun to go back and check out that stuff. So that's going to be it for this video. Hopefully you guys enjoy it, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Take it easy for now. Bye.